So let me introduce the partner for this session today, Engender Health from India. And we have a very interesting group coming from this organization who have been long working with sexual and reproductive health rights of young people. So let me introduce Haripriya Vasudeva, Dr. Haripriya Vasudeva, to introduce her team and maybe to take us through on the session particulars of today's session that they will be conducting or they're conducting along with MenEngage South Asia for us to, for all the young people who are joining us today, for us to learn and kind of, contribute to this discussion. Thank you so much. Haripriya, over to you.
Thank you, Samitha. Hi, everyone. Greetings from Engender Health. So before introducing everyone in my team, I would like to introduce you my favorite person. Yeah, I think you all can see two gorgeous ladies on the screen. Correct, that's me and my grandma. My grandma is an 80-year-old lady coming from a middle-class family with some conservative roots. And we hail from Kerala, one of the most educated literate states in India. And you might be wondering what my grandma has to do with this SRHR youth advocacy. Well, here's the catch. She is the one who has sown the seed of advocacy in me, unknowingly or knowingly. The story goes like this. Well, whenever I was in my grandma's home, especially during my adolescence, and I was menstruating, she would keep me isolated. She firmly believed that if I touch anything while menstruating, I will make them impure. Was it because she doesn't love me or there was some prejudice beliefs? No. The thing is, my grandma is not alone in this. There are many who still believe, who have this outdated belief that menstruation is a taboo. There are many ill beliefs associated with it. So at that time, even though I used to feel very dejected and I used to feel very hurt, but in order to respect her beliefs, I would religiously follow it. But in my school, when I learned about menstruation in a scientific manner, I tried to teach my grandma regarding the same. That's a different story whether she changed or not. But the thing is, I tried. While looking back, I think that was one of the most initial stages of my advocacy. To try to teach what I know and to teach what I know which is scientific, not some random beliefs. As I further grew up, as years passed by, I reached my degree. I was doing my graduation. At that time, me and my peers were very curious about sexual intercourse. And we used to rely on our married friends, married classmates, because at the time of 19 and 20 years, there are many classmates of mine who were married. At that time, that was the only source where we could get such information. And I remember at that time, I used to refer to health magazines, ask doctor columns, and I would, have a group discussions with my friends. I would lead that discussions. It was also one of the part of this advocacy, which I later recognized. It is not a surprising fact that I was very curious about what changes these boys undergo. I was very well aware of menstruation, but not what are the changes which male population goes through. So while doing my master's, when I studied development psychology and I came to know about this in boys, it was really a eureka moment for me. I was happy that I would be able to guide my younger brother, who at that time was at threshold of entering his adolescent phase. And I am happy to say that my brother knows for his SRHR concern, he can, come to me and clear his doubts. Well, it's not a surprising fact that he won't come to me. He would rely on his peers and his friends for this, knowing about SRHR. I'm not surprised because still today, SRHR is a taboo topic for us. We are not very comfortable with discussing with our family. We are more comfortable with discussing with our peer groups. And I would say that my advocacy was limited to my friends, my family, just that. But I got to know the magnitude of this problem when I joined Engender Health. I came to know about the unmet needs, about still the recent surveys show that even today, 50% of young population girls use clothes for their menstruation. And there is around 25% of unmet needs for family contraceptives among youth population. All this was like an eye-opener for me. I realized that there is more to do for youth and youth advocacy is needed in this area. This is my story. I am comparatively coming from a background, middle class background. I have good education. I had more opportunities than many, but still I was so ill-informed in this area. And that itself shows how much we need more to focus on this SRHR advocacy. And this is my SRHR story, and I believe we all have one SRHR story if we think about it. And we will realize that there is much greater need to work towards it. And Engender Health has been quite, for a long time has been working in this area. And the next sessions will be led by Anna, Director of Adolescent and Youth SRHR at Engender Health. She will take you through the remaining sessions. So I invite Anna, my colleague, for the sessions. Over to you, Anna. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Haripriya. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everyone. My name is Ana Aguilera, and as Haripriya mentioned, I work at Engender Health and happy to be here with you today. I will just ask if you can hear and see me. Give me a thumbs up, maybe with your reaction, and we'll keep it going. Okay, great. Great. So today's session, first, I wanted to share a little bit about Engender Health and who we are. So Engender Health is a global sexual and reproductive health and rights nonprofit international organization working across 12 countries all around the world, including in Southeast Asia. And our work at Engender Health really is to advance gender equality in and through sexual and reproductive health and rights. And what that means is that all of what we do, whether it's improving health systems to be more responsive to young people, or doing advocacy for sexual and reproductive health and rights, or community mobilization, all of it is really grounded in the idea that we fundamentally believe that we need to advance gender equality, we need to work with young people across the world, and we need to integrate a gender, youth, and social inclusion lens. And so you'll learn more about who we are and what we do throughout this session, but that's just a quick start and welcome. So we'll be discussing sort of 3 key objectives today. First is to introduce, understand, and discuss the need for SRHR advocacy among young people in South Asia. We'll talk a little bit about gender responsive approaches in this work and why they matter. And then we'll shift towards the end of the call today to look more about learning from each other and all of the expertise and the advocacy expertise in this room from all of you. And so we'll talk more about a cross-learning platform on SRHR policies and advocacy in South Asia. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. Great. So that's essentially the agenda for today, and you can go to the next slide. And first, to start off with, we have a group exercise that we'd like to do. So we're going to put in the chat box a link to a Jamboard, and I'll do that in just 1 minute. Here it goes. If you can, everyone can please click on the Jamboard, and I will try to share my screen, and I'll ask if the host, someone can make me a host so I can share my screen, that would be great. But when you click on the link in the chat box, it should take you to a Jamboard, and there's one question for you to answer. What does sexual and reproductive health and rights mean to you? And we would love for everyone to take 1 minute and reflect on this and contribute what they think in the Jamboard. Thank you so much for those who have shared. Again, feel free to keep sharing. We'll just start the debrief here. And it's really exciting to see all of the different contributions. Some people are saying sexual and reproductive health and rights means awareness about menstrual hygiene, means right to choose my own sexuality, the freedom to choose without fear or coercion in a supportive environment. Yes, better health and opportunities, an important part of our lives to know about, better awareness, rights to have autonomy over sexual and reproductive process and body, right to life. I see someone is putting supporting sexual minorities, where men, women, boys, and girls have equal access to quality services and information, the right to know my sexual and reproductive health rights, to gain agency to access knowledge and information. This is really, really exciting. Freedom to choose. I really love that several of you are writing about freedoms and rights, and it seems like that's a big theme here. And in addition to having the freedom to choose, others of us are writing about being respectful and accepting of others and their rights and their choices. And so that's really exciting. I mean, I think you can see that we all bring certain experiences, lived experiences that are crucial to this work. And I hope you can see that we have so much in common, despite I'm sure we all come from different backgrounds, different countries, different contexts, but really looking at, I think this Jamboard is demonstrating how this is so important, and this right and the fundamental right to be able to choose. And so, keeping this in mind, we'd ask you to keep this idea in mind for the rest of the session as we talk about different aspects of sexual and reproductive health and rights. And of course, we all know that this is personal for us. And we also know that sexual and reproductive health and rights advocacy is about coming together and advancing a common cause. So you can feel free to keep adding to this. I'm going to stop sharing the Jamboard section, but you have the link. So if something comes to mind throughout the session, you can always go into the Jamboard and add your ideas and additional thoughts. But to get us on the same page, I'll ask Rukshana if you could share the PowerPoint again, that would be lovely. Thank you so much. But so that we can all be on the same page, we also want to share with you the globally accepted and defined definition of sexual and reproductive health and rights. And that should be coming up on your screen any minute. Thank you so much, Rukshana. Yes. Next slide. Perfect. Thank you. So the Guttmacher Institute and the Lancet came together a few years ago and created a commission. And this commission undertook this extensive global journey to really help better frame and understand sexual and reproductive health and rights, because there was a recognition that it was different in different places of the world, different contexts, different groups. And so they came together and developed this comprehensive definition of sexual and reproductive health and rights. And I'll just read it as you can see it on your screen, because I think it really demonstrates all of the aspects that all of you put in the Jamboard. Sexual and reproductive health is a state of physical, emotional, mental, and social well-being in relation to all aspects of sexuality and reproduction, not merely the absence of disease, dysfunction, or infirmity. Therefore, a positive approach to sexuality and reproduction should recognize the part played by pleasurable sexual relationships or pleasure, trust, and communication in promoting self-esteem and overall well-being. And this is the last part I think I want to emphasize, because I think it came out really strongly in your contributions. All individuals have a right to make decisions governing their bodies and to access services that support that right. So as we think about our advocacy efforts in the future, think about this idea that every individual in the world has a right to make decisions over their bodies, as we talked about, and to access services that support that right. And it's a holistic approach that includes positive sexuality and pleasure. And so we're so excited that you're here with us today, and we'll share in the link in the chat box a link to the Guttmacher Lancet Commission, so you have access to this if you would like to reference it in the future. But we can go to the next slide now. Thank you so much, Rukshana. Great. So now that we have a globally accepted definition of sexual and reproductive health and rights, how does this relate to advocacy and the work that all of you do and why you're here today? Well, the advocacy that we all do, especially with young people, can take many different shapes and forms. There's no one ideal or perfect way to do advocacy. And what's exciting about what we want to share today is that it can take so many different shapes and forms, and we want to recognize, respect, and really amplify the different kinds of advocacy that we all do. So to do that, we have a Flower of Youth Participation, which was developed by Choice for Youth and Sexuality, a global youth-led organization. And through it, I'll walk you through very quickly the different forms of participation as related to advocacy. So these are really the different ways that you have been and could continue to engage in the future as related to SRHR advocacy. So as you can see here, the roots here are the core elements that you need. The leaves and the petals are the different forms of participation. The insects are the non-meaningful forms of participation, meaning the things we don't want to do. And then the water and the sun are the preconditions, or the things that are necessary for this flower to grow or for this advocacy to flourish. So with the advocacy, we start with young people are appointed a role and informed right here in this little leaf. And so with this little leaf, an example of this could be that you as a young person are invited to a high-level advocacy meeting on SRHR in your home country. And you're given the opportunity to give a 2-minute speech on the importance of youth SRHR. And the organization that's supporting your participation tells you that you can draft your speech, but it has to be reviewed and approved by the head of the organization, and it has to be sent to the Ministry of Health before the meeting so they can review it. This would be an example of a young person being appointed a role and informed. If we move towards the other leaf, young people are consulted and informed. An example of this could be a youth advocate is invited to form part of a study that's seeking to understand sexual and reproductive health needs and barriers that stand in the way. So you as a youth advocate could participate in the focus group discussions or in an in-depth interview, but you're not involved in the design or the implementation of the study. This is a way where young people are consulted and informed. And then as you move towards the petals of the flower, right up here, you're moving towards more meaningful forms of participation and advocacy. So one example could be adult-led shared decision-making with youth. This is where a youth-led coalition could be invited to join a collective SRHR advocacy campaign, and that's being led by non-youth for, let's say, the Generation Equality Forum. The group can come together and can define advocacy priorities and strategies, and the youth-led coalition members have a voting right in this process. So each of them have a vote. This would be where it's adult-led or non-youth-led, but it's sharing decision-making because the youth coalition members have voting power and rights. Then as we move up to the other parts of the petals, you have youth-led shared decision-making with adults. And this could be when you, as a young person, want to advocate for more youth leadership and participation in the national government. And you could ask an adult-led or non-youth NGO, like Engender Health, working on these issues, to join you and jointly set out a strategy and to conduct maybe a lobbying or advocacy campaign. Engender Health often engages in this way. We're not a youth-led organization, but we love and prioritize working with youth-led networks. So this would be an example where a youth-led coalition is coming up with the advocacy strategy, the mapping, and a non-youth-led organization could be supporting that. And then there are two more, and then we'll be done with the flower. You have youth-led, adults have no decision-making power. So this is where young people, and you might have done this before in your expertise and your experience, they create your own advocacy asks and your own campaigns online, in person, with stakeholders. And young people have all of the power to make decisions about what the campaign is, what the advocacy ask is, how you do it. And those of us in non-youth-led organizations sort of listen to and support from a distance and watch that happen. And then finally, you have youth-adult partnership. And again, there is no one perfect way to do youth advocacy. These are all just examples and opportunities. So for a youth-adult partnership, both young people and adults or non-youth are equally involved and share power. And the emphasis is sharing power. They enjoy equal voice and define the aims of an activity or a program together. So an example of this could be when young people join non-youth to mobilize against maybe a harmful act or a harmful law, that regulation, a policy that creates additional barriers to abortion access, including the needs for parents to consent to young people getting an abortion from a health facility, maybe something related to that. So within this group, everyone is involved in the decision-making and has equal voice. And so this is something we really love doing at Engender Health, that we would love to work with you on in the future, because it really is about sharing decision-making and sharing power, which we believe is really important in youth advocacy work for SRHR. So these are just examples. As you go through the rest of today's session, you'll see how these examples come to life. But we wanted to give you sort of this background so that you also have these tools in your toolkit as you continue to grow as youth advocates. So that is it from my side. I am going to go ahead and introduce my colleague, Rinjim. And Rinjim is and I hope I get this right, Rinjim, our Senior Specialist for Gender for our India Country Program. And I'm sure she will give you more of an introduction of herself and walk you through our next exercise. So over to you, Rinjim.
Thank you so much, Anna. And this beautiful flower, you described it so well. I think it's really going to be very memorable, the way that you showed it along with the roots and the leaves and all of that. Thank you for laying the context so well. Hello everybody to this session on gender responsive approaches in youth SRHR. Most of you would be either youth advocates. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. Thanks, Rukshana. Most of you would be either youth champions, youth advocates yourselves, or former youth advocates, or involved in some way in this sector, have some stake, so to say, or some interest in it. So I thought it would be good to have two leading questions, two guiding questions in a way, which will set the context for this particular session. Okay, so there are these two Mentimeter questions. I'll read them out and then you'll find the link in the chat. One, your government recognizes diversities, non-binary persons' needs and other intersecting identities in youth-related SRHR policies and programs. Now, do you strongly agree to that or not? The second question is the risks of safety, security and backlash for young women and gender minority persons working as SRHR youth leaders is sufficiently taken care of in your work. So thanks, and just keep the responses coming in. So yeah, I can see a few no's, and I think I'll proceed on the assumption that there will be a lot of no's to this. There won't be a lot of agreement to the two statements. Can't fully agree, somebody has said. So yes, there would also be a certain, there are areas which are being dealt with in some way in policies and programs, but yet at the same time, there may be a certain amount of areas which are still gender blind. So I think the purpose of doing this exercise is to show that there is a need to transform the field from within to ensure that gender and social inclusion concerns are integrated in this sector. And I'd also like to clarify that we can't assume that because we are working in the space of getting access or improving access to reproductive health, that our work is automatically gender equitable. It's automatically something which includes aspects of social inclusion. There is a need to explore how do we be more sensitive to and take into account the long-standing structural social norms that exist and which create this current reality of widespread gender discrimination, coercion, violence that young leaders face and its impact on policy and programs. If you could go to the next slide, please. Based on this exercise that we've just done, I was thinking that, there is this problem statement in a way. Do you think that it would be relevant to your current work and interests if we explore it? That in the area of youth SRHR work and advocacy, youth is mostly seen as this single monolithic homogeneous group. So how do we change our youth partnerships and practices to become more intersectional and inclusive? So as the second part of that slide mentions, it would mean, firstly, how do we move beyond the gender binary and challenge heteronormative structures? Secondly, are we really listening to the gender-specific experiences and perceptions of people who are working in this sector? For instance, there is a complex relationship between the larger societal context and the gendered barriers that young people have to navigate in their leadership roles in SRHR. So the effort here is to try and identify the invisible structures and barriers to equality. For instance, are we only privileging certain elite cross sections of the youth population? Maybe those who are better educated with greater access to resources and opportunities in this field. All of this limits the contribution of youth and the impact of youth. So next slide, please. Right. So even as we need to encourage and increase the participation of youth in the SRHR advocacy space, we also need to be, we need to simultaneously address their gendered experiences and perceptions. So we do know, particularly since most of us are here living in the global south, in South Asian countries, and in our contexts here, we know that there is a particular stigma and backlash associated with matters related to working on what is considered so-called taboo topics of sex and sexuality, particularly for youth, young women belonging to traditional societies. There is a certain level of shaming and stigma, which even, however, young men working in this field face. So the question is, are we putting in adequate mechanisms to respond to this? And also due to patriarchal environments, young women are vulnerable to so many forms of gender-based violence, sexual harassment, assault, all of that as they go about their work. This, as we know, is also the phase of life in which when girls mature, there are enormous restrictions imposed by families and communities on their mobility, their choices, and their freedoms. And also a lot of the work-life conflicts begin because there are these limits on their time due to the expectations of domestic work and care work, which generally becomes very heavily burdensome now. Of course, male youth also face their other set of gender expectations. That's also very important to realize and discuss. Maybe they are being ridiculed for working in an area like, reproductive health is sometimes just widely considered that it's a women's issue. And, why are guys working in it? And there is also the pressure of supporting their families through wage work, getting good jobs, so to say, all of which holds back youth in multiple ways. All of these experiences, why are we discussing it in some detail over here? It's because it impacts youth leadership in this sector, and also it impacts the quality of the overall goals and outcomes which SRHR advocacy is working towards, which is to be transformative and to be rights-based. So only when our practices change, then we would be able to make sure that we influence youth policies and programs also to be intersectional and inclusive, and to carry out the necessary advocacy with government partners, as well as, of course, with donors and other implementing partners to carry out, to sort of support intersectional integration. So, Rukshana, do we have time for a quick jambo over here?
Sure.
Okay. So now that this issue has been discussed to some extent and the context clarified, I'd like you all here to please respond on the jambo to this question. What comes to your mind when you think about gender in youth partnerships in SRHR? For instance, how does the gender situation in the youth work of SRHR, how is it relevant to you? Does it resonate with you? What kind of issues related to gender have you observed or experienced? Can you put this in the chat? And I'll also take a moment here to acknowledge that in gender health, and I have been part of, Anna also has been part of this learning platform called the Yield Hub, where we've been discussing a lot of these issues, reflecting on them with a number of other organizations and networks such as MenEngage, as well as Restless Development, CAMI Fund, all of these. So much of what I'm speaking about is, discussions and learnings that we've had from the Yield Hub. Okay, so please move to this second page, which is what comes to your mind when you think about gender in youth SRHR. What are the kind of issues which resonate with you, which you've seen in the work? The taboo regarding SRHR due to the rampant patriarchy and conservative attitude of society, the lack of education, awareness, and government initiative also makes it worse. Absolutely, patriarchy is at the root of it. Restrictive gender norms influence youth SRHR. Yes, very much so. It influences, I'm sure those of you who are young champions over here right now would also be able to share your experiences, and you're welcome to share your experiences in the chat as to how, patriarchal norms, inequitable norms impact your work, and also the larger advocacy. The understanding of SRHR of young girls and boys are very different, thus leading to discrimination. Boys' engagement in SRH as a taboo, blaming to boys only. Yes, I think there's a lot of comments which are coming in which indicate how experiences are different for male youth and female youth. Lack of sensitivity on SRHR leads to GBV. Yes, youth are not aware of their SRHR and no systems are there to promote it. And it still prevails due to the patriarchal thought of our society. Enough attention is not paid to gender equality. Yes, yes. Improve the understanding of self needs and of others among youth. The lack of proper gender neutrality, this is the comment, in schools is also a major problem. Most of the time, girls feel marginalized due to over preference of boys. Lack of information leads to unwanted pregnancy and diseases. Okay, I'm admitting people also. Lack of sensitivity on SRHR leads to GBV of multiple types. That's true. Women are shamed when learning about their own bodies. Not involving men as allies is also very poor. Absolutely. Restrictive gender norms influence youth SRHR. SRHR has been confined to women and women's needs.
Yeah, this is Anna. Just I'm sharing the screen. So there are three that just came in about the influence of toxic social media influencers who uphold the patriarchy. And then another one on resources are not allocated enough since it's considered a women's matter. And similar one, SRHR programs more confined to girls and women rather than boys.
So this is like a framework of action in order to, to bridge the gap between just talking about theoretically the issue of intersectionality, inclusion, and all that in this space. Building on all that you all have identified, I thought it would be useful here to outline some practical next steps, like what actions can I take to more intentionally implement feminist and inclusive approaches in the work. So one, include in the work and in the goal young people who identify as diverse, who belong to marginalized, disadvantaged groups, and amplify their voices. For instance, organizations can ensure that they walk the talk by recruiting and retaining maybe diverse populations of young women, trans, and gender diverse youth as agents of change. And the second thing is tracking the gendered experiences, perceptions, and impacts of youth, engaging with other social movements beyond SRHR to to explore tools and approaches on how they are responding with greater intersectionality. Very important is also to get buy-in from donors and organizational and institutional leadership at all levels. Because for instance, to resource and initiate accountability mechanisms like youth co-led, for instance, gender and inclusion assessments in the workplace. That's something that Aman in Gender Health, for instance, is leading currently. These are some very specific examples. Facilitating spaces is important for debate and dialogue because unless those platforms and spaces are created, all the rest of the things that we're talking about, they won't really ever be discussed. They won't get surfaced on those issues. Then decolonizing knowledge, what does that mean? It means developing models of learning, of youth training, of youth programs that are deeply rooted and they are responsive to our local contexts and that emerge from the youth in our own communities rather than maybe certain templates that may be more hierarchically driven, a top-down, and they may be originating from other contexts. Decolonization is something to keep in mind. To be intentional in creating peer mentoring and support systems for young women, because sometimes we feel that, after all, they can always reach out to us, but it has to be intentionally developed, those kind of mechanisms and platforms. fostering mutually beneficial intergenerational relationships and ensuring equity in professional advancement and having this sort of youth leadership pipeline that we are looking at from the very beginning. Equity in professional advancement will also mean things like sometimes when youth say that, okay, now from being a volunteer, we would like to get into a paid kind of a work, that there could be barriers to that. Sometimes it's easier for male youth champions to convert their work in this sector into sort of professional advancements rather than female youth champions. So to be mindful of all of that and keep it in mind. And so basically these are the steps which can be implemented at 3 levels. The organizational or institutional level, the second would be at the project level, and the third would be in advocacy efforts with governments, with policymakers, with donors, and with other implementing partners. So that's it really from me. Thank you so much. If there are any questions, clarifications, any additions, do we have time for that now, Rukshana, or do we take that up later?
We can take that up later.
Takeaways. We can take it up later?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, so according to me, all the key takeaways were discussed already, but if anybody would like to add to it, you're welcome to do that. Or is this part of the next section of this session?
Rimjin, before we go on to the next item, just wanted to read out a comment from Lakshman. So he said, it's interesting to see that our thinking is still heavily informed by gender binary point of view when we understand youth. It will be important to take into consideration LGBTQI and gender non-conforming identities when we discuss or think about youth and SRHR. This thinking can be a strong piece on and itself in the agenda of sexual and reproductive rights.
Yes, I think in our languages, in the way we design our youth SRHR policies and programs, Lakshman, totally, we are still completely, looking at it in this very blinkered, binary point of view. That's one, and also greater social inclusion, needs of marginalized groups, gender diverse groups, yes, sexual minorities, yes, but also, other marginalized and backward groups, those that may be culturally and, socially disadvantaged. So all of that, right? Thank you so much for this. So thank you, and let me now hand over to our youth champions in gender health, which is Aman and Dhruv. Aman is also a Jedi champion, something that we call the Jedi champion, and she will tell you more about it. Something very interesting that she's doing. Thank you.
So we are receiving the answers in the subsequent slides. So in considering the first question, strategic communication, what will be your core advocacy narratives or messages? We have received some of the responses. The first one, I would read it out loud, that one participant mentioned that there should be a need to discuss about the SRHR education in the classrooms, about the contraceptives and the options and its effectiveness. Then we have that there should be big sister and big brother program where trained youth facilitators can converse with youth and regarding their SRHR queries. Then it has been mentioned that we should advocate breaking up for gender norms that prevent young unmarried women from accessing SRHR services. Yes, so this is also one of the issues. Then to increase investment in young people for capitalizing youth population for socio-economic growth. So these are some of the great responses and answers which we have received under this section. Moving forward, what are the opportunities or events that you could leverage to draw attention to the issue among key stakeholders? So highlight a case study of a family struggling with large families. That's nice. Then we have highlight international events where other countries make contraception more widely available.
Thank you. So this was the case study which we have presented. It was basically related to the unmet SRH need among the young people, and there is the participants were the member of a local NGO who work for the advocacy of who works for the NGO in promotion of the SRH. So what will they do in the situation? So my first question was, what step will you take to gather the insight and evidence on the issue? Over here, we have received few great responses, like focus on the group discussion with the parents, literature review, and what does the data say? How can we mobilize youth? We should have a testimony signed with the youth to address this problem at the higher level. And also one person I've also mentioned over here that before the opening of the health center, there should be a mobilization of the community, and the community should have been told about in beforehand what they have told over there, and what is this for basically. So for my second question, we have asked the participants, how will you initiate and organize SRH advocacy at district and sub-district level? So over here, we have received again a few great and few really great responses. So someone have told over here, stakeholder consultation at district level, initiate talk with the government agencies. So over here, people have basically focused on how the SRH advocacy can be done, and it's really great to know that most of the people know about SRH advocacy because they have mentioned it at every level, whether it's the public aware, whether it's on the community level, whether it's on the government level and district level. So they have talked about each and every aspect of that. So yeah, this is all from my side. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone from Engender Health for taking up the session today. I think that was very engaged session, and I think today's session, looking at it from overall perspective, is very important in terms of, I mean, like looking at the question that whether, Rimjim, whether we agree or disagree to all the policies and all the practices that is happening in our countries, and also how countries are responding to young people who are working very strictly on these kind of advocacy issues. I mean, we all are in the same place. I didn't see anyone putting that, in terms of their own countries, that they can agree. So that means SRHR is one of the main key areas that South Asia is facing in a common way. And that is something that we can definitely come together as different networks, as different organizations, as youth advocates, because it's a very challenging area, and we definitely need to put everybody's effort, everybody's thinking, and everybody's learning, and maybe good practices that they have already done in their own countries. So that is very important, and I'm sure that is why these this Google Sheet and also the questions that was raised in the breakout rooms is very important, so that for young people to know that there are other platforms and there are things that we can get connected, that we don't need to feel very isolated. And like sometimes we all feel that although you are a big network, or whether you are a single organization or you are a single activist, we all face our own challenges and sometimes feel that there's no way of going forward time to time. And these sessions are very important for all of us to give that punch back. No, there are enough of opportunities, there are enough spaces that we can definitely talk about these things, and enough efforts that we can take together and bring people together and voice out in terms of advocating for these SRHR issues that we are talking about all the time. So I would suppose that this is not just one-off session. This is just a beginning of something that we are looking forward to do together in the future. And definitely MenEngage South Asia and our local networks in all 5 countries, MenEngage Bangladesh, MenEngage Nepal, Pakistan, and India, we can all come together, and definitely there are other young youth and other networks in the region that we can come together in the future to develop a regional advocacy forum, or maybe regional advocacy action, call to action, or something that we feel is very important. So I'm really thankful that we have been able to put this session together with support of Engender Health. And thank you, Rimjin, for kindly coming on board, bringing your own team. That had been quite interesting for us, and supporting this whole session of peer learning and engaging young people. So thank you all very much. Please be engaged. So be tuned and please join again. Thank you so very much, everybody. And definitely in Engender Health, thank you so much.